Hello and welcome back. So the game will be released in around 10 days from now, and I am pretty much very excited to play it. Now, of course, besides industry, besides exploration and other stuff, one big part of the game is PvP, and pretty much I am mostly experienced in that aspect, since I've been a combat pilot for a very long time now. And well, here I'll be sharing some of my personal advices and pretty much giving a guide on pretty much how to do PvP in this game without actually losing too many ships. Now, it is known that this game is very serious in that aspect, and pretty much if you lose your ship, then you will have to pretty much buy a new one. And there is also the saying, don't fly ships you can't afford to lose, which is pretty much, I think, already over 10 years old. And in my case, in this game, I was mostly successful with destroyers and frigates. Now, your to-go ship might be something else, something different, but in my case, it is a destroyer and of course the frigates. And those ships are, I think, pretty much the best ships for this for solo combat and of course for fleet combat, at least in the smaller scale one. And the to-go weapon that I was going with are missiles and pretty much decomposers. Railguns were pretty decent, they were pretty good. Autocannons and artillery were also pretty good, while I noticed lasers being very weak and drones as well. So, for this particular video, I'll be flying several ships, and I'll be starting with my Talar, of course. This ship is the ship that I did fly during the first beta and the second beta, and on this ship I have very much over 1000 confirmed kills during both of these betas combined. And this ship was especially effective in the first beta when the missiles were really overpowered. And I used to have 2000 alpha on this ship. Pretty much my missiles would do 2000 damage on 0 resistances per salvo, which for this ship was really broken at the time. Now, in the last beta, the missiles were a little bit more balanced, and the damage was around 1.5 thousand per salvo, which is still pretty nice and pretty decent. And I do expect missiles to be very strong when the game gets released, so I would say if you're aiming for a very cheap and of course very effective PvP ship, you can go with missile ships. Pretty much cavalry ships and some Mimitar ships are definitely going to be very good for that. And keep in mind the missiles that I was using during the second beta were Mark 5 at most on the Talar, and pretty much in the video that you're seeing here. And pretty much a very cheap and very budget build for this ship, and it turned out to be very effective. Now, of course, you have several ways on how to play PvP. You can be a tank and pretty much be prepared to have a longer fight, or you can be pretty much a pure DPS, which I am currently, and you are going to rely on the moment of surprise, and pretty much you have to rely on the area that you're warping in pretty much, and you will have to mostly rely on the elements of surprise, since the goal here is to kill the enemy before they kill you pretty much. Since you are going to be focused purely on DPS, you are going to have little to no tank, and you will have to rely on your ship and of course on your own skill level to kill the enemy before they kill you, since without any tank they have pretty much good chances of actually defending themselves. And in my case, pretty much during the second open beta, I did run into a couple of situations where I was almost caught in my own trap, pretty much where I almost lost my ship because of me not being fast enough. So you will have definitely to be prepared when you are going to do PvP in this type of a ship. Now, a similar tanky ship, catching enemies will be a little bit difficult, but you will have a lot more chances at surviving, since you are going to have a tank, and it is a less recommended way to do PvP in the game, since people usually like to focus purely on DPS to kill as fast as possible. And of course, in the videos that you are seeing here, I am pretty much using the element of surprise, and I am pretty much using the ship's velocity, and of course I'm using the situation that the enemy is caught on. Now, there are also ways of defending yourself against these types of attacks. Pretty much how to avoid getting killed in PvP, or how to avoid getting caught. Pretty much as soon as you see someone jump in your local, align yourself and be prepared to warp, since I like to think that everyone who jumps in my system is after my ship. So in my case, whenever someone jumps in the system that I don't know, I align myself and I prepare to warp. And of course, or if I am ready for PvP, I am just waiting for them to warp in, since you have to count that everyone is after you in this game, and you really have to be prepared to defend yourself in certain situations. Now, the ships that I use to fly are mostly ships that have missiles on them. Now, of course, I did fly the new ships with the decomposers, and in this case, I think I am flying a. It is a Condor 2. It is a frigate. Now, PvP with a frigate relies definitely on your speed, relies on the element of surprise, and of course relies on your DPS and on the enemy that you're aiming for. Fighting destroyers with this ship, with frigates of course, is kind of risky because destroyers are naturally made to counter frigates, and destroyers are definitely going to have higher DPS than your frigate. Now, of course, you have assault frigates, you have the stealth bombers, and you have other ships that are designed pretty much for combat. And the Condor 2 is a interceptor, a ship designed to pretty much web and scramble enemies, and I am flying one, and I did catch a Thrasher 2. Pretty much they are ships of the same tier, and here I did have a lot of luck on my side, and besides luck I do have the element of surprise and of course the weaponry. Since as you can see, the Thrasher has really good tracking on his artillery, and he did have a big chance at taking me out here, but the element of surprise and pretty much the overall element of surprise is pretty much your best ally here, besides your speed. Even though I have a afterburner that pretty much gives me enough speed without increasing my signature radius, they still can track you, so you have to be very careful when you're doing PvP, especially solo PvP in a frigate. These frigates are usually excellent at catching enemy, they're excellent tacklers, pretty much they can be designed to pretty much catch an enemy and then your fleet warps in and kills them. A good example of something like that is this situation here. Now here I am in my battlecruiser, and this ship has 1900 DPS, pretty much its DPS is pretty high up. And well, one of them tackled this battlecruiser and he cannot move, and in this case he is getting caught. So pretty much you have several ways of flying the frigates, destroyers, and pretty much you will have your own role in a fleet. Now, in a fleet, your fleet will consist of a couple tacklers, a lot of primary damage ships, and of course logistics. All of these ships are going to be very important, and they have to work really synchronized in a fleet in order for the fleet to be very successful. And of course, that will require some practice. And usually the primary targets in these fleets are the logistics, since they are your primary target usually, mostly because they can repair the enemy fleet, and as such they need to be taken out first. Because if the fleet doesn't have any logistics and if the fleet cannot repair itself, then the fleet is pretty much a easy target. Now, you have also several types of fleets. You have fleets that primarily focuses on DPS, and you have pretty much fleets that has their own builds, and of course fleets that focus themselves on repairing themselves. Pretty much you have a variety of fleets, and it is also purely situational. But most fleets have designed and pretty much specified the DPS ships, specified logistics, and of course specified tacklers. And all of these ships are very important for a fleet to work. And usually that type of fleet will prevail, and that type of fleet usually will end up victorious in combat, and of course in fleet warfare, and of course in citadel defense, and also that type of content, they are also going to prevail. So having a good fleet is definitely a very good thing, and of course we are going to see a lot of excellent fleets in this game when the game gets released. Now, for solo combat, since I did usually fly, most of the time I did fly destroyers. Now I also did fly other ships, but the destroyers were pretty much, I think, a perfect balance between speed and DPS and of course survivability. And in the early on game, you will have a lot of destroyers and frigates flying around, so having a really good destroyer for combat is definitely going to be an excellent idea. Now, as for the ship tier and ship type, which ships are excellent for this job? Well, I did pretty much find the Talvar to be very good for pretty much both fleets and for solo combat. Pretty much a well-equipped Talvar with a budget build that can do 1.5k DPS or 1.5k alpha is going to do in a fleet of 10, 15,000 damage per hit, and not many ships can actually withstand 15,000 damage per 5-second cycle. And they are pretty much usually cheap, very cheap ships, and you can take out bigger enemies, pretty much cruisers, battle cruisers, and in some cases battleships with a well-designed and well-equipped fleet of Talvars, which is a interesting thing. And I do expect to see Talvar fleets in this game a lot, since those ships are pretty much really robust, they're fast, they have a bonus on micro warp drive signature radius reduction, which makes them excellent for using a micro warp drive, and they are overall really well designed and robust ships for fleet combat. Now, for a more serious fleet, of course, you are going to see fleets of battle cruisers, battleships, and pretty much in the future you're going to see fleets of capitals, sub-capitals, and pretty much other ships. And pretty much for the fun factor, the most fun to fly ships that aren't that expensive and pretty much that aren't expensive to lose are definitely Talvars, at least in my case and in my personal experience. I'd say Talvars are pretty much the least expensive ships to fly, and they are also they're actually performing really well for their price. So in the future I do expect to see a lot of Talvars. Now, as for the sub-modules, afterburners or micro warp drives or a combination of both is definitely a good thing. Micro warp drives are excellent at giving you crazy speeds, but of course they will give you a penalty of increased signature radius, and that makes you a easier target to lock. So pretty much you can use micro warp drives, but you will definitely have to rely on the surprise factor, and of course you will have to rely on the situation that you're catching the enemy in. And most frigates can develop at least 3.5 thousand meters per second speed and above with a micro warp drive, but it will make them a lot easier to lock on and a lot easier for the target to defend itself against them. Now, for the destroyers, it is pretty much similar situation. The signature radius of destroyers is of course a lot bigger than on frigates, so it's going to be a lot easier for them to be locked on with a micro warp drive. And for that you also have to be relying on the situation, and you have to be reliant on the enemy, that the enemy will not spot you in time. And of course, like I said, the surprise factor is definitely going to play a big role in this. Now, for the bigger ships, of course, I wouldn't fly bigger ships than a destroyer in solo PvP. Now, of course, since it's me, I'll definitely do that when the game gets released. And for that, you will definitely need a cruiser that is capable of cloaking itself, or a cruiser that is very fast and very agile for this purpose. Since remember, cruisers are bigger ships, and you will have to have webifers, scramblers, and pretty much neutralizers in order to defend yourself against smaller targets that can easily get under your weapons range and that can easily get really close to you. And if they can outmaneuver your tracking, then you're done. Then you're done for. Then they can kill you. So if you're in a cruiser and if you're doing solo PvP, make sure that you have ways to slow down smaller targets, that they cannot get under your range or that they cannot get over your range. Since if they do that, well, then you're pretty much toast, because you have to be careful, since it is really easy for a faction frigate or for a high tier frigate to take out any cruiser, because they are small targets, it's harder to lock them on, and they're fast. And if they get too close to you, if they orbit you around 500 meters and you don't have any ways to slow them down or to make distance between you and the enemy, then they have a big chance of actually taking him out. And of course, drones and drone boats they aren't that powerful. They weren't that powerful in this last beta. In the first beta, they were overpowered. In the second beta, they were weak. I think they were going to be a lot more balanced when the game gets released. So you can definitely try drone boats. They're good. You can try Vexors and you can try other frigates and other destroyers that are reliant on drones to do their DPS. But here, in this beta, drones weren't that powerful, and drone boats were pretty much a easy target. And they will probably do that. They'll probably change that when the game gets released. And I'm definitely going to test out those performances. But again, if you're in a drone boat, then pretty much it is the same situation. For smaller targets, you will have to launch small drones. For medium targets, smaller medium drones, but medium drones are recommended. And for bigger targets, for battle cruisers, battleships, you're definitely going to have to use the big drones. Now, of course, that depends on your ship, since frigates cannot fit a lot of medium drones, they can fit a lot of small drones. The cruisers can fit a variety of medium, small, and sometimes even large drones, and of course, bigger ships can fit all types of drones without much of a problem. It all depends on your drone hangar and drone capacity that your ship can take. Now, lasers. Well, lasers were pretty weak, and I haven't seen. Well, I did see one enemy, one target that did have lasers, and he was an easy kill because lasers were weak. And I wouldn't currently recommend that you try lasers in PvP because they feel really weak. The to-go weapon for me were, like I said, missiles, railguns, decomposers, and the decomposers they are going to be balanced out, and it's safely for me to say that the decomposers are going to be powerful, and the decomposers are definitely going to be the to-go weapon for the future ships that are going to be released within that new faction. And of course, I'll be flying them when the time comes. And I did fly them during the open beta, and they were really good. They were really overpowered, actually. They were really overpowered, and I did have some really nice kills with them. Now, pretty much for the other modules, your fit should be revolving. Now, the two modules that you definitely have to have, or at least one of the modules that you will definitely have to have in order to even attempt PvP, is a warp scramble, and of course a status webifer, since you don't want enemies to pretty much escape from your target, that you don't want enemies to escape from you, and having a scrambler is definitely a really good idea. A webifer is definitely a addition to that because it can slow down your enemy's speed, making them easier to hit, and of course making them harder to escape from you. If they're faster than you, then you would definitely want to have a webifer to slow them down, and of course to keep them in the scramble range in order to prevent them from warping out. And of course, a good bonus and a good addition is a energy neutralizer, and of course energy Nosferatu. They're excellent at fighting Amar and Galanta ships, since they are pretty much reliant on energy. And of course some cavalry ships that are also reliant on railguns and of course on energy. And that way, with those additions, with those modules, you can pretty much make sure that you survive in combat. And of course, it will make sure that you survive your engagement with the enemy, or of course not exactly enemy, but with your target. So your target is pretty much your enemy when you're fighting them, when you shoot them. So that's why I call them enemies. But in the end, they're just your targets. And the perfect, like I said, the perfect cheaper ships are those that I did fly. Of course, you can try with other ships. Now, the tier 2 frigates, I wouldn't do PvP with them. Maybe in a fleet, and maybe they can be excellent talkers, but I feel they don't have the bonuses, and they are lacking modules for any effective solo combat, so keep that in mind. And the perfect balance between price and between performance is definitely the tier 4 trainer destroyers and tier 5, of course. Now, of course, you can also try the faction frigates. Faction frigates are excellent at PvP, and their overall DPS is amazing. And the Dramiel, Worm, and pretty much Succubus are really good frigates. They're really fast. The Succubus is also really fast. The Dramiel is also excellent at its speed. The Talvar Assault is also very good. It has decent bonuses on its weapons, and it does do it does do a lot of damage. Now, of course, you have the ECM frigates, pretty much the electronic warfare frigates. They are excellent in a fleet. They can pretty much web stun and pretty much do other nasty stuff to your enemies. And of course, they are found in. They are also being found in sites. They can also be as an NPC. So make sure if you're in a site or if you're doing an anomaly to make those ships your primary target. And those ships are also excellent addition to fleets because they're really useful. And pretty much besides that, the logistics, like I said, they're also very important. They can repair your fleet and they can keep you alive. And pretty much I think I did cover most of the ships. Now the battleships, a solo battleship for PvP is something that I would not recommend. They're slow, they're big, they take time to warp, and they're big targets, big and easy targets, easy to catch with a frigate. They're excellent in a fleet though, and they're excellent in other major serious combat, for example, citadel attack or of course citadel defense, and big fleets are definitely going to have lots of battleships in them, and of course battle cruisers. Battle cruisers, on the other hand, are also good for fleets and good for ratting. Both battleships and both battle cruisers are excellent at ratting and at fleets. And I think the upper limit for solo PvP is definitely going to be a cruiser, a faction cruiser or a really fast cruiser that has the capability of either warping fast, or that's really, or overall that has great speed and great DPS, or that can cloak is definitely the ship that I'll be going for. Mostly because you never know what's on the other side of the gate. There might be a gate camp, or there might be something worse. So perfect, a perfect balance is frigates and of course destroyers. Bombers are a story for pretty much another time, since they're also excellent at shooting bigger targets. And of course, they're also frigates, so you can also use them to shoot smaller targets, but most of the time they're going to be effective only at bigger targets because of the torpedoes, their explosion velocity, and of course, since torpedoes are overall designed to shoot bigger targets. And pretty much, I think I did cover most of the ships this time around. Of course, I'll cover the special classes of ships later on when I have more time. And of course, I'll be waiting for that when the game gets officially released, since I do want to fly them. And I do want to have a special video on these ships, of course, in faction ships included. Cover tops frigates are definitely good for various scenarios. They're also good for catching enemies, or they're going to be very good at catching unsuspected high-tier battleships or carriers or even dreads in anomalies of course, in the distant future. Well, I hope that you enjoyed. This was pretty much the PvP guide, if you want to call it like that. And well, if you have any other questions, feel free to ask me in the comments. I am going to make sure that I read all of them. And well, with that being said, stay safe, fly safe, and I'll see you next time.